Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Hall, and I am the Asia Pacific Client Services Manager with the Synopsys Software Integrity Group. Today, I'll be talking to you about how AppSec is changing and what you can learn from it. This is based off of a report called BSIM, which I'll be describing a little bit more detail through the presentation. So what will we talk about today? So first, we're going to talk about what's in the news. I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to BSIM, as well as what trends we're actually seeing in BSIM, and then what you can do to improve your application security programs. So let's start off with what's in the news. So in Singapore, there's been a number of different data breaches that have been reported, some of them more high profile than the other. Of course, the highest profile being IHIS. When, of course, your Prime Minister's data is involved, it's going to be very high priority. I'm sure everyone has heard of that one, and perhaps the others that are here in the screenshots. But what I don't think everybody knows is that you can actually go to the PDPC website and take a look at the different enforcement decisions that they've made. There's actually a complete list, and you can filter by the penalty, if any. So what I'm showing here is just the penalties that have been meted out that are $25,000 and above. There's actually many, many more if you go below that, or those that are just warnings. So this is part of what we don't want to be a part of. You have your AppSec programs because you don't want to have breaches and you don't want to be reported in the newspaper. Let's just next jump into what exactly BSIM is. So from the name, it is Building Security in Maturity Model, and it's something that Synopsys publishes. You've heard that, but I'm not sure that you've actually everybody has heard of Synopsys or what exactly we do. So we have a number of different quality and security products and services that we offer. So we have different types of consulting work that we do. One of them, of course, is BSIM, that we can do an assessment for you. We also have other types of assessments that we do, penetration testing, red teaming, as well as the various products from Coverity SaaS to Black Duck software composition analysis. So these different tools and different services that we offer actually give us a very holistic view of security. And you don't have to take just my word for it that these are best of breed tools, but we also get recognition from various analysts from Forrester to Gartner, and we're well positioned in those reports as well for SAST as well as SCA. But let's get into the crux of what BSIM is. So this started many years ago by a company called Cigital, which was actually later acquired by Synopsys. And so at that point in time, we wanted to understand what organizations were doing to protect their security assets in terms of what activities they were doing. We understood that there's different experts that put their opinions out there, but what we didn't want to put together is another expert opinion where it's specific to that particular condition which the expert is talking about. We really wanted to understand what organizations that we felt were doing a good job with regards to application security, what were they doing? So we actually went to talk with 9 different organizations who we felt had good programs. We asked them, what are you doing? Let us understand. What are you really doing to protect your software portfolios? So we took the data from those interviews that we conducted with those 9 organizations and actually created this open framework called the BSIM framework. We didn't stop there. It was refined through yearly releases of the report over the next 11 to 12 years. And so what we've been able to do then is to actually view trends in application security through these yearly publications. So what BSIM actually provides you, it provides your organization visibility in terms of how it's protecting its assets and how it compares to other organizations in the data pool. Because you, of course, have limited budget and budget limited time. So you need to make sure you understand where you should be focusing your AppSec program to be more successful over time. How is BSIM organized? So there's actually 121 unique activities, and there's not a single organization within BSIM that actually performs all of these activities. How these activities are organized is within 12 different practices, and those practices are then grouped into 4 different domains, as you can see here. BSIM actually helps organizations to plan, to execute, mature, as well as measure their software security initiatives. And one of the ways that we like to do that in the BSIM is to actually provide this spider report, because it's a nice visualization on how organizations are doing in, or how they're spending their effort relative to the different practices. So what we do is we assign a level to each of the practices. So a level 1 is something that most organizations are doing. Level 2 is something that less organizations are doing, and level 3 is something that very or few organizations are doing. This could be due to the complexity required for that particular activity, or it could just be that it's a relatively new activity, so most organizations have not started doing it. How we give a number to an organization is the highest level activity within that practice that the organization is performing. So a level 2 is about average for any practice. So you can see the relative efforts. So this particular diagram is for all firms in the latest BSIM, in BSIM 11. So you can see relative to other practices, standards and requirements actually is actually done at a higher level compared to all the rest. This is, as I mentioned earlier, this is actually an open framework. So you can actually download BSIM, read about the different activities, and score your own organization and plot it on this same spider chart. With BSIM 11, what we've done is, this is actually the 11th iteration of BSIM. And over time, since the initial BSIM, we've actually done over 500 assessments across 211 different firms. However, in this latest BSIM 11, there's actually 130 firms, because what we do is we keep only the last 3.5 years to make sure that the BSIM is actually up to date. And so within that, we're actually seeing that organizations do multiple BSIMs. So there's two reasons for that. One of the reasons is that maybe they're a very large organization and different departments have different postures, different procedures in place, and so they can actually be assessed distinctly. So a single organization could do multiple BSIMs that way. But what is more common is that organizations do multiple BSIMs over time, because a BSIM is actually a point-in-time measurement for your organization. So what they want to know is, are they improving? It's a good way to perhaps show to your stakeholders, to your bosses, what you're doing that is improving things, that the different initiatives that you have in place are leading to an actual better score in the BSIM. We've also seen in the latest BSIM, these are our key takeaways, which we will actually be getting to in a little bit more detail after this. Within the latest BSIM, we can see this is the breakdown in terms of verticals and geographies where the organizations come from. The most popular are ISVs, which are independent software vendors, financials, and fintech. In terms of where they are located, majority come from North America, because that's where BSIM started, but we are seeing more and more in Asia Pacific as well as in Europe. All right, so let's get on to what we see in terms of the trends of the BSIM in this latest BSIM 11. So the very first thing that we see is shift left is becoming shift everywhere. So obviously shift left as a term has been around for more than a decade, and I'm sure everybody knows what it means, in that you're trying to identify defects and fix them earlier in the development lifecycle. Obviously, the reason that you want to do that is less complex and is cheaper to fix them at that stage. This was probably first introduced in terms of a quality assurance aspect that you're looking at, but now it's really something that also security is done for. What we are seeing now, actually, however, is a change from just shift left. We're actually seeing that security initiatives are being implemented everywhere in the software development lifecycle. So we're calling this shift everywhere. So if you look at the first phase, you look at planning, you could be doing something like, doing a BSIM to determine what are the security initiatives that you want to be working on. You could be doing threat modeling, looking at your application, see what are the different, how it can be attacked and how you might mitigate those attacks. So these are things that help you during the design phase, planning phase, and to really embed security into the design and make sure that your engineering teams are getting involved with security from the very start. If you look next at, say, the code and build, you could implement all types of tools. You want to make sure that developers are writing secure code. If you talk about SAST can be run, during your nightly build. It could be run whenever you're checking in new code. It could also be run in the IDE of the developers. So this is something that will help your developers write better code and can actually be viewed as something like a spell checker for your developers, something that is running all the time and they're using to learn. Next, looking at the test and release phase. This is something where you're probably doing something like penetration testing. Normally you'd involve some external assessors who have a more detailed understanding of the vulnerabilities and can exploit them. You could also be doing something like fuzz testing, where you're sending random inputs to your application in the hopes of actually crashing it. Next, if you're looking at the deployment phase, this is somewhere where you could perhaps be doing network vulnerability analysis. If your application is hosted on the cloud, you could do a configuration review to make sure that is configured securely based on that vendor's deployment or that vendor's platform. Next, on the operations and monitoring standpoint, you want to make sure that you have a security incident response team in place in case there is a security incident. You want to make sure that security engineers are also still performing those same tests. DAST is running, pen tests are running, red teaming is done, so that you can find security vulnerabilities in your production code. You want to make sure that then it's triaged, it's fixed, and of course then fixes are redeployed into production. So you can see that security is done almost everywhere in the development lifecycle now. The next thing that we're seeing is engineering-led software security. So engineering is really taking up more responsibility when it comes to security. Previously, the security teams would just have the security policies defined and they would push it down into the engineering teams, but that's changing. The engineering teams are really embedding security into the SDLC. So what we're seeing is that increasingly there are software security initiatives which are reporting through to the CTO and not the CISO, which was done very commonly in the past. CI/CD and automation are really becoming an integral part into how security is approached. We're also seeing that engineering teams are now starting to embed security champions within their teams. So what this means is that expertise from security engineers are actually getting embedded into the code, embedded as code. So the developers are being educated about how to catch defects during the time that they're coding, and it's embedded into their CI/CD tool chains. So what this really means is that it's really much more of a team effort than it is a security team trying to push things into the engineering team. We're also seeing that with the adoption of cloud is extremely popular now, and what this forces the engineering teams to do is to actually engage with their vendors to make sure that these platforms are secure. So, secure configuration, security best practices, which are specific to the platform that they are using. All right, so the next thing that we are seeing is software-defined governance. So as an engineer, when you are developing an application, what you want to ensure is that there's very, very low friction, that things are moving very quickly from development through to production. And in fact, so one of the key concepts in DevOps is being able to push applications through to production, applications and functionality, as fast as possible in the hopes that you're gaining a competitive advantage. So anything that impedes the ability to push it through to production as fast as possible is viewed as friction. So there's a lot of effort nowadays to ensure that whatever tools that are being used to enforce security are as low friction as possible. Organizations make sure that the tools that they're using are completely automated, they run as fast as possible because, of course, speed of the security is absolutely critical. So in the past, you might have had various security policies or measures that are enforced using manual tasks, or they're manually enforced out of band, which slow down how which slow down DevOps basically and make it not true DevOps. So instead, what you're seeing is that these manual tasks are actually being replaced by sensors and bots and automation. And this automates things in the sense that the detection, the triage, and the fixing can all be done automatically with as much automation as possible. So these policies are becoming part of the code of the DevOps. So that's why we say software-defined governance. The next thing that we're seeing is that resilience is becoming a primary goal. So with engineering teams wanting to deploy as fast as possible, we're talking about DevOps already, there's kind of a shift in that previously security was an absolute standard. You had to reach a very high level of security. Only once every single one of the security checks had been passed, you can get it through to production. But now there's a shift to kind of being secure enough, because we're able to deploy to production much, much faster, and monitoring is in place in production. That allows organizations to have this mindset of secure enough. So if an issue actually makes it to production, they're constantly monitoring, and if they find that issue, they pull it back, they fix it, and they redeploy to production. This is what enforces this concept of resilience that's becoming much more popular nowadays. Next thing that we're seeing is it's very similar to what we have been talking about already, but it's actually the increased adoption of DevSecOps. Everything we've talked about is about automation, embedding security into your SDLC, making sure that your CI/CD tool chains have security. So this is very prevalent now. So these are really taking hold because of the engineering-led initiatives that we talked about. And security is really viewed as one part of quality assurance within the SDLC, much more so than in the past. So pushing code as fast as possible, ensuring it's monitored in production, as well as all of these concepts that we've talked about are pretty much fundamental to DevSecOps, and it's exactly what we are seeing. All these mature organizations in BSIM 11. All right, so what we're going to take a look at next is how you can actually improve your organization's AppSec programs. So the very first thing you can do is try to identify which maturity phase you're in. So what I've got there on the left is a diagram which has a number of different buckets, which gives 1 point for an organization for each activity that they are performing. So there's a number of different buckets, and those are the bars. So you can see that most organizations are performing between 31 and 45 activities, and very, very few organizations are performing more than 76 activities. The line there is actually the average age of the software security group within the organization. So you can actually see also there's a definite trend in that the age of the software security group, as your software security group gets older, the number of activities that you are actually performing increases. Right. So in terms of BSIM, we see it as having 3 phases in an AppSec program. So the very first phase is the emerging phase. So your software security group, your org could be starting from scratch, or is just formalizing some ad hoc security activities. So you've gotten some initial strategy defined. Maybe you've done your first look at the BSIM, and what are those most important activities that you want to implement. Of course, at this time, you're going to have budget and resource constraints. At the next stage in maturing, you have an organization where there's a number of different activities implemented, but what you need to do is actually scale them and streamline them. So your activities may not be implemented by all departments. Maybe it's not implemented by all the software applications that are being implemented. So you want to make sure that you're actually growing these activities and maybe implementing a few, but probably the place to look at if you're in maturing is actually increasing the depth of those and breadth of those existing activities. In the final phase, optimizing, so an organization just needs to fine-tune their application. So you're implementing a large number of activities, they all have good depth and breadth, and the security management actually has a clear view on the operational expectations and metrics. You're able to adapt to changing technology drivers very well as well. All right, so The next thing that you can do is embrace DevSecOps. I think I've already talked a lot about DevSecOps and embedding your security into your engineering teams, embedding it into your SDLCs. So this is something that you really want to look at adopting. If you are having a security team which is very isolated from your development teams, and there's kind of that conflict, is something that you should really look into in how to mesh the teams together and move more to the engineering-led security that we've been talking about already, so that then you can have this fast-moving DevSecOps that most modern organizations are moving to nowadays. The next thing that you want to do is implement some key activities. But so what I recommend doing here is actually assessing your organization with regards to a BSIM. So you need to know what those activities are. And as I said, BSIM helps give you that visibility into the areas that you need to focus on. So this is another spider chart where we've taken that same look from, or the same view from all the firms in the light green. So that's kind of the average from BSIM 11. And we've actually then plotted in a dark green, which is an example, a fictitious firm, onto that same spider chart. You can see that, say, for example, in software environment, they are doing a little bit better than the average. Whereas if you look at security features and design, they're not doing as well compared to the average. So there's an opportunity there for this fictitious firm to look at what are the activities there. Maybe they should look at the level 1 activities, because almost all other organizations are doing those, and then take a look at the level 2s as well, so that then they can see which activities make sense for them in their environment. You could also, of course, take a look at the spiders from different verticals, because we offer that in the BSIMs as well, because each vertical is also different. You don't want to just compare to the overall when it makes more sense to look at your vertical. The other thing you can do is look at these specific activities which we've seen explosive growth over compared to BSIM 10. And so these are activities that are really growing fast. And so the first one is about using application containers. So this is these are level 2 activities, the first two that I'll talk about. So some organizations are doing this, but I would not say most, although the growth really is quite large. So organizations are using application containers to make development easier and, of course, decrease costs. The next thing that you can look at is ensuring that cloud security basics have been taken care of. I've actually mentioned this a couple times already. So organizations, they're ensuring that the cloud security basics are in place to keep pace with the overall increase in adoption of the cloud-based deployments. The next are kind of level 3 activities. So these are something that only a few organizations are looking at, but I'm sure that in BSIM 12, we're going to see these continue to grow. So organizations are using orchestration for containers and virtualized environments. So organizations use these to ensure that the workloads meet the security requirements. The next activity that we're seeing is that application inventory with operations bill of material. So enhanced application inventory, sorry. So organizations are leveraging operations bill of materials to enhance their application inventory. So all of these activities actually, by chance, happen to be as part of the SE, which is software environment practice. So these are things for you to keep in mind. But of course, I think more important than just jumping on these very popular ones is to actually assess your organization. As I said earlier, then you can determine what makes sense for your organization. The last thing that I want to talk about is actually looking at defining roles and responsibilities. With distinct roles and responsibilities, it's much easier to implement the correct software security initiatives. Everyone knows what they need to do. The first thing that you should look at is executive leadership, because the majority of successful AppSec initiative actually have a specific executive sponsor. It makes it much easier with a single person involved that the different approvals are obtained, and you're able to get through these initiatives without too much bottlenecks. The next thing is to have an application security team. So basically, all organizations in BSIM 11 have a specific AppSec team. So as you saw in the earlier graph, with a software security group, the with the age of the software security group increases the number of activities that your organization can do. So without these teams, it'll just be It'll be very, very hard, near impossible, to have a consistent approach to your AppSec efforts. Another thing that we are already mentioned is security champions. So having these security champions embedded within your engineering teams just helps to raise awareness and gather support for these security initiatives and make sure that they are actually successful. And then, of course, then the last thing is everyone else in your organization. So all employees actually play an indirect role into the success of the security program. So encouraging all employees will make sure that awareness is there, that there is education amongst them all, and to really help your security initiatives to be successful. All right, that brings me to the end. I hope that hearing about BSIM as well as the trends we see in BSIM 11 has been useful to you, and I hope you've enjoyed this session. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you for joining me today, and have a great day.